Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you for the very last episode of 2019 from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Aaron, last show of the year. How are you feeling?
It's the last show of the first decade of the Cloudcast.
That's right. Wow.
Not quite, but the decade we started it in.
That's right. That's right.
Doing good.
So, I've been thinking about this because, we're going to kind of get into the show. We're going to do the show sort of in three little segments. It'll be a little different than we normally do, but not terribly different. But I got to imagine, the show has grown a decent amount this year. People may be wondering, why are you on the show so much lately? Or even, who are you and I? Because we never really introduce ourselves. So maybe we should do that first.
That's right. Absolutely. So this is Aaron. And actually, it was kind of funny. I actually had somebody when I was at AWS reInvent say exactly that. They're like, oh, yeah, I know the show, but I don't know who's who. And they because we didn't necessarily identify voices and it was a new listener. And so, yeah, I completely get that. And that's fair. So this is Aaron.
Yeah, this is Brian.
And yeah, exactly. And I should be on the show. Like I kind of had a pretty busy 2019, to be very honest with you. Did a startup, and was a very, very busy year. But quite frankly, I'm probably off to the next thing here in the very near future. And so I've been kind of taking a step back, got a holidays with the family, and kind of been enjoying things. But it's also allowed us to put some more time into the podcast and potentially launch some new things as well, which we'll be talking about here in a second.
Yeah, absolutely. So people may wonder, why, hey, you've got two names on the introduction. How come there's only one? Long time ago, we both used to be on every single show. That was back before we were traveling an enormous amount for jobs and we had kids doing different activities and growing up. We now have reached the point where, one of the hosts is going to be on the show. You can guarantee that at all times, but we can't always guarantee that two will be on. So, hopefully that's
redundancy.
That's a good intro. Yeah, exactly. That's a good introduction. So, second thing in this sort of first segment, which we're calling podcast business. We mentioned a few weeks ago that the donations for the Krispy Kreme run are now open. So if you look in your show notes, right in the very top, it will say like donut run donations. There's a big link there. If you go to thecloudcast.net in the top right corner, you will see a link to make a donation. We set a goal for about $3,500 this year. That's kind of roughly in that $3,500, $4,000 range. We're at about $1,500 so far, and the race is early part of February. So if you'd like to make a donation, we would love it. Any little amount helps, $10, $5, $25. Larger ones are always welcome. But if you do it before the end of the year, it is at least in the U.S., a taxable donation. So if you need a write-off for the year, that's always available. So thank you to anybody who makes a donation.
Yeah, and for all the new listeners that are out there, we did kind of summarize it on the last show, but to be clear, the donation, it doesn't support the podcast. No. This is our annual thing where we ask everyone to kind of give back, and for us, the donations go to the North Carolina Children's Hospital to help kids in need and families in need with health issues, and it's been our annual thing. It's been going on. What is it? It's maybe 7 years now.
Yeah, 6-7 years. So
somewhere in there. It's our annual thing that it's our way of giving back to the community locally here.
Right. Yeah. 100% of the money goes to the kids. We don't see any of it. We're just a conduit to help represent the community. So Last thing, and this is sort of a big announcement. We're excited about this. We are going to be launching sort of a new podcast series. The name is still a little bit to be determined. So for now, we're just going to call it Cloudcast Basics. But Aaron, why are we trying to do something new? I mean, we have a really awesome following. The following's growing, but why would we want to create something new, and why would we want to create something basic?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to talk about this is there's a lot of folks constantly coming into this industry, as evidenced by the growth of the podcast, but our podcast tends to has gone from, basics back in the day when we were still learning to something that's pretty deep and at times is maybe a little bit difficult for somebody new in the community, just coming in or just looking to learn. And so we wanted to kind of almost go back a little bit into what if it's somebody that's brand new? What if it's somebody that is, step 1, step 2 in their journey versus somebody who's been following us for 8-9 years now? And so we wanted to kind of have two paths, right? The emerging tech and somebody who's been around here for a long time, keep this avenue going, but then also bringing some new folks into the community as well and continuing to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you'll start seeing is we're gonna do it a couple of ways. We will leak a few of the basic shows into the main feed, so you will from time to time see the basic shows in the main feed. This is that's mostly to help if you've got some people that you work with, some people that are new to this technology space. It's a great way for you to say, hey, you can. This is an easy way for you to listen to it. It'll still have the same Cloudcast brand, so that won't change. The other thing we're going to do that's a little different is, the current shows are a little bit schizophrenic in that we bounce around from topic to topic, and it's good. You get exposure to a lot of things, but they are a little bit all over the place. These basic ones are going to basically be done in series, so you're going to be able to sort of start. They're going to be more sort of binge mode, like maybe you see on Netflix. They'll be between 6 and 10 episodes, roughly 10 minutes, 12 minutes. And they're going to be about sort of one topic from start to finish, or one category of area. And they're going to be a little bit of technology, a little bit of sort of the business side and the economics of cloud computing. So lots of different ranges. And then, as we go along, we'll sort of give you links to the new feed that comes out. But, our hope is, either if you want to, double down on sort of making sure your basics, your fundamentals, they'll be helpful to you. But also we hope that you share them with friends who are trying to get into the industry, trying to learn some things, maybe aren't, like Aaron said, up to speed on some of the depth we go into with regular Cloudcast. And then eventually, hopefully they migrate over to listening to the show as well. So helps us grow the show. Hopefully it helps the community kind of get up to speed, and we're excited to be doing it. So those are going to be launching first part of January. So going to be starting that pretty soon.
So when you're saying you're schizophrenic, is that a nice way of saying we haven't had our shit together?
No. We just, it's sometimes sometimes new and exciting topics come up at any given time. That's what that is. So
that was a great spin. Well done.
Exactly. Well, cool. We're going to wrap up podcast business, and we are going to jump into the next segment. Today's episode is sponsored by Datadog, the cloud scale monitoring service that provides comprehensive visibility into public cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud environments with over 250 integrations. Datadog unifies your metrics, logs, and distributed request traces into one platform, so you can investigate and troubleshoot issues across every layer of your stack. Use Datadog's rich, customizable dashboards and algorithmic alerts to monitor cloud migrations in real time. To start a free trial today, and Datadog sending you a free t-shirt, visit datadoghq.com/cloudcast to get started. That's datadoghq.com/cloudcast. And we're back, Aaron. We're kind of back to the traditional opening segment of the show. We're going to do cloud news of the week. And, since there's not a whole lot of net new cloud news of the week, sort of tech industry news of the week, we thought we would cover the Cloudcast itself as cloud news of the week. We do this every year, kind of state of the podcast, if you will. So you want to jump into sort of where we are, what we've grown, and what the community as a whole has been doing?
Yeah, absolutely. We don't talk about the listens, too much on the show, but we actually probably do. This is the one show of the year where we tend to kind of reveal a little bit behind the scenes, and then 40% year over year growth, which is I would say pretty on par with all the other years, and over 1.6 million. Listens for the year. So huge thank you to the community for continuing to listen and for telling a friend and passing word around.
Yeah. No, we only exist because you folks listen, because you tell a friend, because you rate it on iTunes. It allows people to find it as they're looking for new technology in all the different podcast players. So big thank you to that. The next most important part of our show beyond the community of listeners is our guests. And we've always sort of prided ourselves on being kind of forward-looking in terms of, the types of technologies we talk about, the types of people we talk about. And one of the interesting byproducts of that is a lot of the companies that come on our show over time, maybe start off as a A round, C round, seed round startup, and at some point they get acquired. And so this year, 9 new companies who had been guests on the Cloudcast, at some point in time were acquired. Let's see, Cloudability, who long time friend of the show, Bromium, Docker, Shippable, SignalFX, Pivotal, NGINX, ParkMyCloud, Twistlock. All 9 of those companies, got acquired in 2019. So we had 9 last year. We had 9 this year. We're up to, I think, 47 total. So about 11% of the.
I was going to ask you. Yeah, you didn't have that in the notes. I was going to ask you what the total was.
Yeah, so 47 total. About 11% of the companies that have been on the show. So it's always we always throw that out. Hey, if you're interested in good visibility, we've got a pretty good track record of picking companies that have been pretty successful. So it's a good place to come to learn about new companies and new technology.
And standard offer, we say it every year, standard offered out to all the VCs out there. We're more than willing to advise.
Exactly. Just a small fee, small finder's fees. And then finally, in IPOs, longtime friend of the show, longtime sponsor of the show, Datadog, went IPO this year. Congratulations to that team. We've known them for a while. Back when everybody just knew them as the cool purple T-shirt company, they're now really doing very well in the monitoring, observability, analytics space. So congratulations to Datadog.
Yeah, and on a complete side note to that, the Datadog, the famous purple T-shirt, that is probably one of the most fought over shirts in the house between my girls and my wife. Yeah, that is, for whatever reason, they love that shirt.
Yeah, it's an awesome shirt, and if you're curious about it, they have been advertising for a long time. You just sign up for an account, and they will send you one of their awesome T-shirts. So definitely something to look at. So we're going to wrap that up for our cloud news of the week. That is basically a giant thank you to the community. You've helped us grow. You've helped us get introduced to new people, and we hope that that continues in 2020. So let's jump into the last segment of the show, which is going to be our trends from the year and our predictions for 2020. Today's show is sponsored by MongoDB. As a programmer, you think in objects. With MongoDB, so does your database. MongoDB is the most popular document database built for modern application developers and the cloud era. Millions of developers use MongoDB today to power the world's most innovative products and services, from cryptocurrency to online gaming, IoT, and much more. Try MongoDB today with Atlas, the global cloud database service that runs on AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. Configure, deploy, and connect to your database in just a few minutes. Check it out today at mongodb.com/atlas. That's mongodb.com/atlas. Aaron, it is the final segment of the final show of both 2019, but also the decade. The last show we reviewed kind of the decade. This one we're going to narrow down our review of 2019, and then we're going to make our sort of world famous predictions likely to be wrong for 2020. So you ready to jump into it?
Yeah, absolutely. And so the first trend we really wanted to talk about, and this reminds me of, way back in the day, we had Simon Wardley on the podcast, and Simon used to always talk about, this was back when we were like, oh, who are going to be the big clouds? And, there was still kind of, the market hadn't quite settled out the way it was. And I always, this is what was the light bulb moment for me, was always who's going to invest the however many billions it takes to build one of these? And I was like, oh, wow, I get, yep, there's a good point. Like, the barrier to entry is so high. And so we have a link in there in the show notes that's super interesting. And it kind of shows public cloud CapEx. And it's also interesting too, to see how everything has skewed over time. Like AWS, for instance, was decently trackable at one point, but now, even AWS, on the web side of the business, or the public cloud side of the business, it's minuscule compared to the warehouses and the operations, right, and how just the behemoth they've become. So it's super interesting to just see how everything is tracked over time.
Yeah, it has been. It is always interesting, and it is one of those things that, especially for the 3 or 4 really big cloud providers, Google, Amazon, Azure, and probably Alibaba these days. It's kind of a blurred thing, right? The businesses that they have that deliver cloud services, and then the businesses that they have in every other market segment, they're all of those are digital businesses at this point. So, when you look at the CapEx numbers, they do grow. They do grow considerably. You have to be a big player to succeed, but it is getting harder and harder to know what part of that is the things they're investing to deliver sort of, web cloud services as opposed to some other type of thing they do. The second big trend, and so that's a trend we always track. We always like to just put them out there as numbers. The second thing we were tracking in terms of numbers, and big shout out to Jordan Navat, who works over at CNBC. We've been following him on Twitter for a long time. He does a awesome job of sort of tracking the kind of AWS numbers. He tracks some of the other ones as well. It's been interesting to watch the last couple of actually probably 5 or 6 quarters of AWS. So we've obviously seen their growth in terms of revenue continue to go up and to the right, but it's been interesting to watch some of the other actual numbers of it. So their operating margins, their operating operating income, their growth rates, all of those have been much lower than they've been in the past, at least, comparing them quarter to quarter and so forth. So AWS is an interesting one to watch because there's times when you kind of can't look at the numbers independently. If you look at them independently, you might be saying, well, they're slowing down their growth, even though their revenue numbers are growing. You also have to take a look at it as, are those, things like operating numbers, margins and so forth. Is that because they're reinvesting in, CapEx? Is that because business is slowing down? Is that Amazon sort of playing games with where the numbers are so that you don't really know what their business looks like? It is a little tricky to kind of dissect some of it, but it does tend to look like, where AWS used to have a massive lead, it is a much more competitive market, if nothing else, if you take nothing else away from it.
Yeah, there's that also combined with just the laws of big numbers. As these numbers continue to get bigger, the percentages of growth tends to eventually get smaller because it just gets harder and harder to keep doubling, or some of these other things as well. And so, and it's really interesting to me how it's like, okay, I remember there was a number in there. It's like, the revenues it was a revenue anyway. One of the numbers was down to they're down to 25%, and it's like, well, that's still pretty damn impressive, right? But it's just not the runaway thing it was at one point. And there's part of me that kind of goes, yep, that's surprising. But then there's part of me that goes, yep, that's completely expected. It just depends on how you look at the numbers. And especially when it comes to reinvestment, I mean, that's what Amazon is known for. Right. They're known for keeping a lot of those numbers down and continuing to grow the business. So it's a combination of what I would say classic way of tracking companies and tracking growth, combined with the way AWS as an industry has kind of turned some of those models or some of those expectations on its head.
Yeah, I think the other thing that comes up in this, and this is not necessarily a 2019 thing, but it's something to sort of keep in mind, right? There's all sorts of talk about, what may happen with future elections and future things that happen, with regulation. Lots of people have always said, hey, maybe big tech companies will get broken up. Maybe at some point, because AWS is so profitable, Amazon will want to spin them out. This may just be part of a much longer game in terms of going, I don't want to convey that AWS is so profitable that, people go, oh, well, you should spin that out, because I think people are going to realize that, so many of the new businesses Amazon is trying to get into are sort of intertwined with their ability to do things with AWS, either as like the first customer in some set of services or something else that, I don't think if you asked Amazon, if you asked Jeff Bezos or Andy Jassy, I don't think they have any intention nor any real desire to spin out AWS. I think it's a really strategic asset for the broader Amazon company, no matter what sort of public pressure there might be to spin it out for, future shareholders or something like that.
Yeah, talk about a key differentiator, right?
Exactly. So,
well, that kind of relates to the next one, which is, we're talking here in the U.S. There's what's referred to as the JEDI contract. It's a Department of Defense contract, and it was worth $10 billion over 10 years. But it was actually awarded to Microsoft and Azure, and that surprised many in the industry. And I actually was on another podcast about it, Greg Neerman's podcast, the Go Your Way podcast, talking specifically about this topic. And so, I'd refer folks over to that one if they want to dig a little deeper into this. But my quick take on it, though, was there was a little bit of like, hey, did politics get involved? And you know what? I'm not touching that rail.
Yeah.
But there is historically, not every contract with the government has gone to AWS. Some of them have gone to Microsoft. It all depends on what was the reason for awarding the contract. There was one that was very infrastructure based, which was the GovCloud that went to AWS. There was another one that was really more, Office and apps and as a service based, and that one went to Microsoft. And this one was all about digital transformation specifically of a lot of the aging infrastructure in the DoD. Well, what does that mean? Right. And that's the one thing I was never able to really dig into publicly. And I'm sure given enough time, we could have found something. But, what was the actual needs of that contract? Because I could see a scenario in which it went to AWS and I could see a scenario in which it went to Azure, politics aside. So the podcast that I did was really all about that. But it was really, really interesting to see that it isn't just assumed anymore that all of the cloud contracts go to AWS.
Yeah. No, and I think that plays to, the number of services that are in the different clouds is starting to get sort of normalized. I think people are, learning the way that you have to go after that business, and I think people, are comfortable with the idea that there isn't a one. Kind of only one player in the whole game. So yeah, it is an interesting thing. It is just one contract. But at the time that the CIA contract years and years ago, the $600 million CIA contract that went to AWS was just one contract. But, it ends up parlaying itself into a number of other things, right? If somebody else did that, well, maybe we can trust this. And yeah, it's always interesting to watch those trends. And, as we talked about in the sort of decade end show last week, Google continues to be, not in that top two. And in fact, depending on who you talk to, maybe not even in the top three, right? Alibaba oftentimes is now sort of talked about as being maybe the third largest. Alibaba to me is the real big kind of mystery in the room. I don't know anybody who's an expert in the Alibaba cloud. I don't know of a good podcast to follow. Like, it is a weird thing in that, it's kind of the Asia Pacific, China cloud. And we talk about it being bigger, but like, who is an expert at that? Who, what do they do that's unique? Or is it just the fact that it covers that part of the world, which just has such a massive, population density, and therefore it's just going to be big because it's, quote unquote, China's cloud.
Yeah. And quick shout out, if we have any listeners out there that are in that region geographically and would like to talk about it, let us know. show@thecloudcast.net.
Yeah. We've always struggled a little bit with the APAC region outside of like Australia and New Zealand. I assume most of that's just for language reasons, but because obviously you don't have to listen to us live. You can listen to us anytime. But yeah, if anybody has that expertise, we'd love to just start scratching the surface on it. We'd love to dig into it.
Yeah. Now, I saw something the other day. Again, there's at the time of we're recording this, there's some headlines here recently of Google kind of going, well, if we don't start becoming bigger, we might cancel the business. And then somebody on Twitter the other day posted a joke thing of it was like the Google Cloud logo and then with the beta tag underneath it, because that means it could go away at any time. I was like, ooh, that was funny.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we've talked extensively about Google Cloud. We'll see if the new CEO Kurian is able to right the ship, and does it become the new Oracle, or does it become some blended Oracle Google type of thing? That'll be very, very interesting. The rest of the stuff we had in trends maybe aren't necessarily trends. They're just kind of interesting things from the larger players in the industry. I'll kind of run through a couple of them. Obviously IBM closed their $34 billion acquisition of Red Hat. It's still alive. We talked about it. I probably shouldn't comment on it too much, but things are still going along.
Stay employed, Brian.
That's
Stay
right.
employed.
That's right. VMware went on a sort of a buying binge this year. They probably win the award for M&A people doing the most spreadsheets and PowerPoint slides. They acquired 8 different companies. Of the ones that probably relate to what our audience mostly cares about. They acquired Bitnami, which is in the sort of application packaging or container packaging, Helm chart packaging. They acquired Pivotal. They sort of brought them back into the family. They were originally VMware. They spun out to Pivotal, back into VMware. And then they acquired a company called Avi Networks, which is around the layer 4 through 7 software-defined networking, proxying, security space. So trying to build out, kind of sort of rebuilding. It'll be interesting to see in 2020. VMware is essentially trying to get in the Kubernetes space. They're trying to sort of build a platform sort of from scratch, but also from pieces and parts. And it'll be interesting to see how if they're able to sort of put those together. It's going to be a pretty big engineering task to do all those things and re-architect vSphere to support Kubernetes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would add Carbon Black into that as well.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to me. We talked a little bit about it on the previous show, but it's interesting to me what VMware is doing, because VMware is, in my mind, pulling a Microsoft-like transition of really trying to stay relevant in this space. And I feel like you can go back and find podcasts from us from a couple of years ago where we were probably pretty down on VMware. And I think I feel like that tide is starting to turn, and Pat's doing a really good job at the helm.
Yeah, he, some people are going to look back on in a couple of years. There was the original, obviously there was sort of the animosity between VMware and AWS about, hey, if an application goes to AWS, it'll be lost forever. And then, there was the sort of awkward Andy Jassy and Pat Gelsinger, on stage, hey, we're announcing VMware in the AWS cloud. And there was a lot of talk at the time of, man, as soon as that starts happening, that's just like a vacuum for AWS to take VMware workloads. And, I'm sure at the time that had to be kind of a gut-wrenching decision for Pat Gelsinger, because it was like, am I giving up my business? Am I embracing something that in the past I didn't embrace? And it's been very interesting to watch that almost every other cloud, I think, now has a hosted VMware service. So, it's either the cloud providers all trying to follow Amazon or VMware now just being really comfortable with this idea of like, hey, if you can run a VMware VM, you should run it everywhere, and we're going to give up on being hesitant about where it runs. And it's an interesting conundrum that they got through, and it'll be interesting to see. I know the VMware on AWS is doing reasonably well, enough to where they actually break out the numbers in the thing, so that tells you it's doing reasonably well. It'll be interesting to see if they break out the numbers in other clouds as well, because those are ones that aren't necessarily run by VMware. They're sort of either like jointly run, or they're run by a third party under the same brand. It's just a little different because AWS has an exclusive on that thing, but that to me is going to be one of those, it's going to define his legacy as a CEO at VMware, whether that decision pans out or, proves to be really successful, or proves to be, hey, the trend of public cloud just overwhelmed the trend of data centers.
Yep. Makes sense.
Yeah. The last stuff we had on the trends were just kind of general trends, right? I mean, one of the things that happens in our industry is everybody gets kind of in awe and overwhelmed with the web scale companies and really big numbers. I think partially because most people don't deal with really big numbers in their life. They relate everything to their own salary, or how much their car cost, or how much their house cost. We talked about this at one point, I think maybe at the mid-year show. There was a lot of announcements this year about, hey, X web scale company, did a X $100 million deal with the public cloud, and therefore all of you should do $100 million deals. Like, it was like a thing for like a week or two, and then it just kind of faded away. It was kind of a weird little blip in 2019.
Yeah, and it was. I actually saw that and I was like, oh wow, that's super interesting, and especially the kind of numbers that were thrown around. But then there's also too, I would say, another a trend, but again, probably another blip is, and I forget some of the companies off the top of my head, but there was this concept of, hey, all these companies are spending, sometimes hundreds of billions of dollars. Well, oh, by the way, there's also these repatriation of data things going on too, because they're spending tens or $100 millions of dollars in cloud operations. And so I don't think this trend has officially settled down yet.
Yeah,
I don't think we've hit the middle. The pendulum swung one way, and it's going to swing back, and it hasn't found middle ground yet.
Yeah, well, plus, I think again, people get overwhelmed by big numbers. I mean, those companies also tend to do, either they are taking in hundreds of millions of dollars in VC funding, or they are taking in, billions of dollars in revenue, and it's like, what percentage of that spend on essentially IT and technology, is it in line with what they should be doing for their industry or their company, or is it like way out of whack? And I think when people looked at the numbers, they were like, oh, it's aligned with what you would expect from either a 100% digital company or a, company that, spends 8% on IT or whatever it is.
Agreed.
All right. So we had a couple of topics that we're going to get to just for the sake of time, since we've been cranking through all this stuff. We're going to leave the topics in the show notes, but I think what we'll do is we'll just sort of, we covered a lot of them throughout the year. There's some good questions. There were some good topics. And I think what we'll do is, just for the sake of time, maybe we'll jump ahead to predictions for 2020. You want to
kind of absolutely. Let's do it. You want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. Sure. Or maybe we'll just kind of go back and forth. We'll take one
that
at
works.
a time. I think we've each got 3 or 4 predictions. First one I've got is, we always talk about the major clouds providers. We tend to talk about AWS and Azure and Google. Probably should throw things like Salesforce in there, as being really a major hub. I'm sort of predicting, and this isn't like a big stretch, but I think we're going to see in 2020, we're going to be talking about GitHub as, kind of in that same vein. I don't know that we'll necessarily see the revenues that we have, but I think the importance of what GitHub delivers, both as a just sort of like a common service to the internet. It's sort of like become like DNS if you're a developer. It's just a thing you interact with, but they're very quickly rolling out a whole bunch of services around developer stuff, and it's interesting to watch where they're trying to take friction out of the developer ecosystem, where they're trying to take friction, out of a developer's day-to-day life. And so, I think we're going to really talk about, maybe a big 7 or 8 or 9 sort of clouds, if you will, and GitHub's going to be right up in there in the top, 4, 5, 6 as something that, as you're thinking about what you do, you have to be talking about, just as much as maybe you're talking about AWS or Azure or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go ahead with mine, and I don't expect Brian to comment on this one at all. So I feel like Kubernetes will kind of hit the standard trough of disillusionment this year. If you really step back and not comparing tech to tech, but you compare the cycle in the industry of Kubernetes versus OpenStack, you had this idea of OpenStack was the new thing. It was going to be great. And, we did many shows, even from OpenStack conferences back in the day. And then what you eventually happened was, oh, wow, this thing, might be hard to operate, or this thing might have these kinds of rough edges, or, oh, by the way, the corporate sponsorship is doing this or doing that. And we're hitting peak Kubernetes, if you will. And once you hit peak Kubernetes, you have to naturally go through that kind of trough of disillusionment of, okay, this is where, some of the rough edges are. This is where we're struggling. This is what's going on. And oh, by the way, that doesn't mean it's going to go away. It will be fine. Yeah. It will come out the other side. Actually, I predict the further prediction to that is I think it will come out the other side actually much better and in a much healthier status than OpenStack did.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would agree, and I'll give you just a little something on that. We're at I think the CNCF said there's like 100 different sort of like distributions of Kubernetes. That's just silly. I mean,
yes. And you saw the sponsor. If anybody saw like the on social media, the list of sponsors from the last KubeCon, like, oh my gosh, it was insane.
Yeah, it's I think the one thing I think the 2 things you'll start to see is again, whether it's trough of disillusionment or hype or whatever it is, I think you'll see a certain culling of those 100. I mean, it's just economically not viable in our industry. We've never seen 100 of anything. The other thing I think you're going to see is you're going to see people talking about, oh, Kubernetes is boring. And quite honestly, if it's doing its job, it's supposed to be boring. It should be getting out of the way. It's going to go from, hey, it's the buzzy thing to, hey, it's boring. And the things that are around Kubernetes, whether it's service mesh or serverless or whatever it is, like those are going to become the things that people will talk about at KubeCon and CNCF and all those other things. So yeah, I think whether it's, you consider it delusionment or boring or whatever, they're going to fall in that we're in the hype cycle.
And it's, at the end of the day, it's by design. I mean, it's plumbing, right? Yeah, it's plumbing. Well, it's plumbing to enable cloud native architectures.
It is plumbing, but it's not. Here's where it's weird. It's not completely plumbing, right? If it was just plumbing, you wouldn't have this stuff that's like, and hey, here's how developers interact with it. And I think that's where it's a little weird. It kind of is its own line, which kind of makes it confusing for people. So
such a great point.
Yeah. I think the second one I've got on my predictions, I think we're going to start seeing more and more kind of vertical AI and ML offerings out there. So, we've gone through a period of time where it's like, hey, here's all this technology. You can put it together yourself if you're a data scientist, get your own data, build your own models, so on and so forth. I think because we're seeing we've seen successes in various areas by using, better data analysis, better, automated type of decision making. I think we're going to see more and more companies and data sets get built for specific verticals, right? And you're going to be able to subscribe to those as a service. You're going to be able to engage with it. It's going to be less about, hey, we're in this industry, so the first thing we have to do is learn how to build out this environment, or even just subscribe to a generic service. I think we're going to see more and more vertical specifics, and the businesses are going to be demanding that because they realize, that's kind of what they need. So I think we'll see more things kickstarting vertical specific things. And that may end up being, a number of guests we have on the show. Like, hey, today we're going to talk about healthcare AI and ML, or today we're going to talk about, autonomous driving AI and ML.
Yep. And I would actually say too, past guest and friend of the show, Dave Cahill and his company, Bonsai. Bonsai was acquired by Microsoft, but they were probably go down in history as a too early in the market example of exactly that. At the end of the day, they were, it was really designed to be AI and ML for industry and very specific verticals, and was designed to be more of a mainstream, here's how you use it kind of tool. And I just think that they were, they just didn't hit the market at quite the right time. Which is I think they did really well. They had a good exit, and they're still doing well within Microsoft. But I think that they were just an early example or pioneer of that trend that will happen without a doubt.
Yep. What else? You got
my next one is I'm going to say serverless will get a new name and will hit its stride. Maybe it's going to be functions as a service will be the ultimate name. Maybe we're just going to, it's going to be the next Kleenex and we're just going to call it Lambda. Like, I don't know exactly where we're going to go with this, but I feel like hopefully this year will be everyone will get over the name. And the value that it provides, I'm still super bullish on it. And I just think it's inevitable that the value that the serverless infrastructures provide will just be not top of mind, will be an emerging trend, much more so in the market in 2020.
Yeah. It's somewhere in there. The fact that people still like to tell you their servers means that, again, some of the marketing around is sort of dumb and misunderstood. It is sort of interesting that a lot of the people that we followed as the early people have just sort of said, I'm tired of explaining this stuff to you. I'm learning it. It makes sense to me. It's helping my business. And if you can't figure it out, tough. And again, sometimes you just go like, I'm keeping the good stuff to myself. And I don't blame those folks who were the early adopters of it doing that. I did hear that, at things like reInvent, that Lambda is still something that is, getting wildly popular in terms of people going to sessions. We've seen the CNCF and the Knative projects and the surrounding projects, evolve quite a bit. So, there's definitely interest in it. I think the bifurcation of serverless versus function as a service and which name is right and all that stuff does confuse people for some reason, rightfully so. But I think there is there's definitely a need for somebody or something to sort of get it on the straight and narrow so that you're like, oh, that's the thing, and it does this valuable thing, and that's why I should want to do the thing, whatever that thing ends up being.
Yeah. And you bring up a great point there too, of like, if I had to say two trends I think will really get a lot of traction between AI and ML and serverless in 2020. I think if you're out there and you're trying to figure out which one to go do, AI ML is more sexy, but it also probably still has a higher barrier to entry. Serverless and functions as a service probably has both a lower barrier to entry and is probably more usable in the vast majority of customers. And so from which one is going to be the more practical emerging trend? Again, maybe less sexy, but I think is more practical from a knowledge-based standpoint.
Yeah, no, I would agree. The cost of entry is very, very low. The friction is very, very low. Maybe we should just start calling it eventful computing, and we'll just trademark that name here on the Cloudcast. Eventful computing will be the big thing for 2020. Yeah, I mean, AI and ML is super data heavy, and you've got to build big models, and it takes a lot of computing to get that first needle in the haystack. So eventful computing definitely much easier than to get started than AI and ML. So next one I have on my list is, last one I have on my list. I think the other thing that we're going to see is, there's a lot of these really big monolithic systems that have driven industries for a long time. So people talk about core banking systems and like ERP systems and so forth. I think we're going to see, and I'm starting to see some early startups that are doing this, that we're going to see companies that essentially offer APIs that replicate really important parts of those core systems, and we're going to start to see those big monolithic type of systems get broken up into APIs and now offered as services. And I think we're going to see, the financial services industry or, the manufacturing industries or healthcare or whatever that rely on things like Epic and whatever, who are going to go, what do I want to be core to my business, right? Like what drives customers to us and what can we essentially outsource to APIs and not have to rethink think like, oh, I'm going to rewrite the core banking system to be successful. And I'm going to be really interested to sort of see how that starts to happen is sort of this distributed nature of kind of really core things that people never thought could be broken up, maybe start getting delivered as APIs. And I'll throw out one name. There's a company called Galileo who is doing this in the financial services industry. We may be able to get them on the show, but they're trying to kind of break up what would be core banking into a bunch of kind of subscribable APIs and probably opens up new applications that you never could do because you are reliant on the core system that was gigantic and monolithic and old.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would expect a certain amount of skinned knees and, some missteps along the way on that. But I think it's an inevitable journey. And I'm really happy to see that happening. So I think it'll be a good trend.
Yeah. You've got the last one.
I've got last one. So the last one is more of just a company prediction. And this is more just kind of, in going to shows this year and talking to folks on show floors and watching, buzz around booths and talking about, which companies are you using or whose products are you using? And so there's two that I think will have breakout years. And I think in 2020, both GitLab and HashiCorp, I'm going to say will have just amazing years. When I talk to folks, those tend to be almost like the foundational tools that it's like, okay, which clouds are you using? It's like, oh, well, I'm using some of these big ones. It's like, okay, which tools are you using? Well, it's typically these names are coming up. The same way you kind of predicted GitHub as one of the major, platforms. I'm saying GitLab and HashiCorp as well is really just, they really seem very foundational, provide a lot of value and have great products that the folks that I talk to just really love using them.
Yeah.
So I think that those are my kind of predictions for big companies.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch. GitLab has their big conference starting in January, so that'll be something we'll keep an eye on. Yeah, I agree. Those are names that people talk about all the time is, love the company, love the technology. One other thing I'll throw out to folks to kind of be looking out for in January, after a 7-year hiatus, Mr. Gene Kim is going to be coming on to talk to us. Gene has a new book out called The Unicorn Project, which is sort of the follow-up to the Phoenix Project. I've been listening to it for a while now. It is very, very interesting to watch, partially how how Gene throws the Phoenix project under the bus with the Unicorn project, and then, well, I mean, it is really a continuation of where that Parts Unlimited left off, and then it's interesting to watch how the new types of themes and cultural references and all sorts of things are now woven into this new thing. So we're going to have a chance to talk to Gene in mid-January. So for those of you that are reading the book, it'll be a good chance to kind of get some insight into it. It's been 7 years.
Has it really been 7 years?
Yeah.
Holy
yeah.
crap.
So
I would have thought it was like 4.
I know.
I still have the signed copy of the first one.
Yeah. So he's been a longtime friend of the show. So last thing, and for anybody who doesn't know the show, the one thing that people may think, oh, you guys have a lot in common. You have a lot of sort of repertoire. You just sort of talk about things. There's one thing that Aaron and I have nothing in common about. I know nothing about science fiction. He knows everything about science fiction. Aaron, what is your take on both sort of the Mandalorian and the latest Star Wars movie? Like, is it good? Is it bad? Do we need 7 hours on this? I mean,
so I'll give you the Cliff Notes version, and it was one of my predictions that I put as my last prediction, but I have to explain the Mandalorian first. So Mandalorian, if you don't know what it is, and you're listening to this podcast, you probably live under a rock. Let's be honest.
I'm the only non-science fiction person in the whole podcast community, so don't feel bad.
So simple take: Mandalorian, amazing show. Even my wife Kim, who, as a general rule, isn't a science fiction person, I mean, completely addicted. It's a fantastic show. We keep waiting. There's one more show to drop at the time we're recording this. Fantastic show. Love the show. The last Star Wars movie is coming out when we record this. It's actually coming out today. I think today, or maybe it was midnight showings last night. But anyway, I haven't seen that yet. Initial reviews from friends is it's okay. Yeah. It kind of closes it up, and it has lots of nostalgia in it. I don't think it necessarily sets any new ground, but when you're closing out a 40 year trilogy and then the 9th film, you don't expect anything new. So I don't, I'm of course going to go see it because I got to check that box on something that was an open loop since I was a kid. So I absolutely have to go do that. But I don't expect to be overwhelmed. By it.
Yeah, the thing.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the thing that's gonna be interesting to me, and I saw the first 3 Star Wars. I've seen the last couple because I'll take the kids, and but I sort of watch them, and they are what they are. And the thing that's gonna be really interesting to me, and it's interesting that you and lots of people sort of love the Mandalorian, and I think they love. I don't know if they love the content of it or they love the fact that it's like Star Wars every week, and it's gonna be really interesting to see how the new viewing habits of people have evolved from like we've got binge watching, we've got series, we've got all these things, and Star Wars has always been this like, hey, when's the next one coming out? Is it going to be a year from now? Is it 2 years from now? There's all this speculation. It builds up all this hype. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, and then they're going to contrast that with the stuff they're doing in these like weekly series and things on Disney Plus. Like, do people want just Star Wars in their life all the time? Are they cool with this idea that it's like every 2 years and they're gonna burn the producer at the stake or the director at the stake? Like it is a weird. It's for somebody who's not totally into it. It's weird to watch the community sort of like fall in love with this new thing. But is it the new thing, or is it the format and the style, or is it the old style is just so hard to live up to other expectations that maybe that goes away? And I'm super curious because it's not like Star Wars as a franchise is going away. They make way too much money on it. It's going to turn into something else, but does it turn into really big movies? Does it turn into something else? That to me is really interesting.
Yeah. And I will say this too, and talking, so I've got 2 teenage girls and talking to them actually the other night about exactly this. One of them wants to see the movie. The other one hasn't seen other movies and doesn't care, but they brought up something that was super interesting. My oldest, the one that doesn't necessarily care, she said, her comment was, she said, Star Wars was for your generation. She said, Marvel is for my generation. And so for her, she's seen every Marvel movie at least twice.
Yeah.
And so for her, like when she kind of grows up and has kids, and she's going to look back on the Marvel movies the way I look back on the Star Wars movies. But I think the Mandalorian is a way to kind of almost potentially reboot that and capture a new generation, because I don't think the Star Wars movies, they caught some of the generation, but it wasn't independent. It was like all the parents dragging their kids to the Star Wars movies.
Yep.
You know, all the Marvel movies. I mean, you know, my daughter, both my daughters went opening night to every single one of them for however many years now.
Yep. Well, cool.
So I'm going to close that out with, so here's my prediction for 2020.
Right.
You know, a Mandalorian style prediction is we will actually learn Baby Yoda's real name. Which is, it's funny because he's not even necessarily Baby Yoda. It's in the series, he's just referred to as the child, but you know, all over social media, you know, it's a Baby Yoda. And so that's what everyone's calling Baby Yoda. And so he doesn't have a name, and he's not called Baby Yoda. That's what the internet is calling him.
Yeah, he's just he's Benjamin Button's Yoda. He's just, you know, he's young to old to young. Well, that's gonna wrap up the Star Wars cast for 2019.
There you
Aaron,
go.
Aaron, you know, you've been asking me for years to indulge you in science fiction. I gave you 10 minutes. We covered
There
it.
you go. Yep. I'm good for another decade.
Yeah, folks, you know, as always, as we wrap up the year, thank you to everybody who listens, who tells a friend. We can't thank you enough. It's a fun journey we go through. We hope what we do is, you know, interesting to you in some ways, that you're learning in some ways. You know, you may not love every episode, but we appreciate you tuning in every week and telling a friend. Aaron, any last thoughts, either for the year or the decade, or just, you know, kind of for the audience in general?
Yeah, no, just echo that, but then also add too, you know, I really like kind of some of the traditions we've developed over time, a little bit of this, of like, hey, the Star Wars thing has become an issue over the years. The Krispy Kreme run has become something that we're repeating over the years. And so what I really like more than anything is, you know, when we go to the events and you know, you have folks that do kind of reach out or you know, they're like, oh, you're Aaron? Like, yeah. I kind of know your voice, or like, I've heard of the Cloudcast, but you know, I have no idea who you are. And so it's just been super fun to go on this journey and you know, certainly learned a lot from the community and happy to give back in some way.
Yeah. So next year is our 10th year of doing it. So we're getting old, but we're still enjoying it. And thank you to all who keep coming back to us every week and telling new people, because the show keeps growing and we're having fun. So looking forward to 2020. As we said before, everybody have a great holiday. Hopefully you get to spend some time with friends and family, get some downtime, and we will look forward to new shows in 2020. So with that, we'll wrap it up, and we will talk to you next week, next year, and next decade.
Thank you for listening to the Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.